The sound came before anyone understood what had happened, a sharp crack that sliced through the midday noise of Silverjack's diner, freezing the clatter of silverware and halting every conversation mid-sentence. A glass of cola trembled on a counter edge, and a handful of loose coins rolled in uneven circles before vanishing beneath dusty booths. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you believe in giving bullies exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. At the center of it all stood two boys who could not have come from more different worlds. 16-year-old Ethan Coleman, the captain of Westbrook High's football team and heir to a chain of real estate businesses, had just struck 12-year-old Noah Bennett across the face hard enough to turn heads on every side of the room. Noah did not cry. He pressed a palm against his reddened cheek and blinked slowly, the faintest tremor in his lashes the only sign of pain. His school bag, a faded blue one patched at the corners, had burst open when he fell, scattering notebooks and a handful of coins that his grandmother had given him that morning to buy fries after class. Ethan sneered, his voice drenched in showy arrogance. Maybe watch where you're walking next time, kid. You just stepped on something that costs more than your life. A few of his teammates laughed on cue, as if cruelty were a team sport. The diner worker at the counter, a middle-aged woman named Marcy, carefully wiped the same spot on the countertop, pretending not to see. Everyone knew Ethan's father had donated half the school's sports facility. Nobody wanted trouble. But what they did not know, what not even the boldest rumor in Westbrook carried, was that Noah's father, Daniel Bennett, was a man who moved like a shadow through powerful circles. His name never appeared in newspapers, yet judges greeted him with respect that bordered on unease and businessmen smiled a little too quickly when he shook their hands. A hush settled for a heartbeat. Noah crouched to gather his things. His tone when he spoke was even and unsettlingly calm. My dad says only people who feel small need to make others smaller. The words slid off Ethan's pride like oil on water. He smirked, leaning closer until Noah could smell the synthetic mint of his chewing gum. Your dad? Let me guess, works at the garage by the highway? Laughter again. But Noah's expression hardly shifted. He slipped his phone under the nearest table, thumb pressing the record icon. No, he murmured. He runs his own kind of business. And he believes in consequences. Something about that steadiness unsettled Ethan. He straightened, forcing a laugh a bit too loudly. Cute speech. Now get out of here before I charge you rent for breathing my air. Noah rose, meeting the older boy's glare without flinching. Their eyes locked, a child's quiet dignity meeting a teenager's loud insecurity, and in that private collision the story's axis tilted. People would later remember the echo of the slap, but what truly mattered happened in that silence. A promise forming behind Noah's dark eyes, the kind of promise that doesn't vanish once the pain fades. Outside, clouds gathered, heavy with late autumn rain. Inside, Ethan basked in the nervous laughter of his friends, oblivious to the small red light still blinking beneath the table. Noah walked out, clutching his torn backpack, breathing steadily even as his cheek burned. He had learned one lesson early in life, that true strength requires quiet. And while Ethan paraded his muscle for the moment, Noah had already begun building something much stronger than revenge. A blueprint for justice that would start with a single recording and end with an entire town remembering his name. By Monday morning, the incident at Silverjack's had crystallized into whispers that skittered through the corridors of Westbrook High like autumn leaves. Ethan Coleman, self-proclaimed emperor of the freshman wing, wore the story as another stripe on his arrogance, telling anyone who would listen how he'd taught some mouthy kid a lesson. His friends laughed until laughter became currency, and fear became common tongue. What Ethan didn't know, what no one could see behind Noah Bennett's calm demeanor, was that the 12-year-old had already built an invisible case, thread by thread, with the precision of a watchmaker. Every insult recorded, every shove discreetly photographed, every witness quietly listed in a notebook whose edges were beginning to fray with overuse. Noah had his father's patience. At home each evening, while his mother graded her students' essays and the smell of roasted vegetables filled the kitchen, Noah sat by the small desk in his room, copying events into tidy columns. Date. Time. Place. Witnesses. Evidence. Daniel Bennett would occasionally glance in, his expression unreadable beneath his reading glasses. What are you doing, son? Noah would answer without hesitation, learning how people behave when they think nobody's watching. His father would give a slow approving nod and disappear again into his study. Daniel never raised his voice nor bragged about what he did for a living, but once, when Noah had asked about the strange visitors who came after dark, Daniel had said, "I fix problems." The legal kind, the moral kind, and sometimes the sort that have no name. Now that same aura of calm justice wrapped around Noah like armor. Ethan meanwhile mistook silence for surrender. He scattered cruel notes across Noah's locker. Watch your back, charity case *, and engineered little accidents in gym class while Coach Reeves pretended not to notice. When Noah's backpack went missing for the third time in a week, he simply wrote it down. Missing property, third repetition, no teacher intervention. There was precision in his method, but there was also something more fragile. A child's hope that truth, displayed clearly enough, might weigh heavier than influence. Yet he also knew from the stories his father never fully told that sometimes justice needed an audience before it could breathe. On Thursday, Ethan's overconfidence ballooned past reason. During lunch, he swaggered toward the courtyard table where Noah sat alone eating quietly. "Still talking to your imaginary father, genius?" Ethan mocked. Noah glanced up, measuring him with calm eyes that only made Ethan more furious. Without raising his voice, Noah replied, "He doesn't need to be here for you to feel him." A snicker rose from the crowd, but this time, it wasn't entirely against Noah. Something in his tone unsettled even the hardened bullies in Ethan's circle. To drown the discomfort, Ethan pushed further. He grabbed Noah's phone from the table, waved it theatrically and said, "Let's call your big, scary dad right now then." Noah's heartbeat slowed instead of racing. He spoke one phrase that turned the laughter to glass. "That's a good idea." Daniel Bennett's voice, when it came through the speaker, was deep enough to still the wind. "Ethan Coleman," he said evenly, somehow already knowing the boy's name. "My son has told me much about you." Ethan froze, words evaporating. "Sir, no need for apologies yet," Daniel interrupted gently. "Just understand, when someone harms my family, that harm becomes my business. I prefer solving business calmly. Do you understand me?" The kindness in the voice was worse than anger. It carried history, consequence, and the quiet power of someone who never needed to shout. Ethan stammered, handed the phone back, and stumbled away while his entourage scattered like startled pigeons. That night, Ethan dreamed of cars idling outside his window, of silent men in overcoats who never knocked. And in another house a few streets away, Noah slept deeply for the first time in days, the blush on his cheek fading into faint memory while his plans solidified into something vast. What began as one act of cruelty had become a chessboard, and Noah Bennett had just made his opening move. Friday arrived shrouded in the kind of gray light that makes an entire town feel uneasy. Ethan Coleman discovered that weekend can come early when fear sets the rhythm, a sleepless night followed by the fragile silence of guilt. Every squeal of brakes outside his house made him twitch. Every stranger's look at school felt like a question he could not answer. He might have called the episode at the diner a mistake if his pride hadn't built him a fortress he now couldn't escape. But cracks had already begun forming in the walls. Whispers that his father had received a mysterious phone call spread through town faster than wildfire through dry leaves. The once invincible Coleman family carried a new scent, one of worry, not wealth. At school that morning, Principal Turner's voice drifted from the loudspeaker, summoning both boys to the office. Ethan walked the corridor with dread ranged round him like a shadow. On the principal's desk sat a manila folder thick enough to alter destinies. Inside, high-definition stills from the diner video, transcripts of text messages where Ethan bragged about his dominance, testimony from students whose courage had finally surpassed their fear. Noah sat quietly in the corner, polite and distant, as though the matter hardly required his presence anymore. When Turner listed the evidence, Ethan didn't argue. He couldn't. His mouth opened but the sound failed him. The suspension notice felt almost merciful compared to the invisible verdict already hanging above him, the judgment of every peer who now saw through his confidence. He stumbled out of the office the way an actor might exit after forgetting his lines, unsure whether the play had ended or simply changed genre. Noah, however, had only reached the story's midpoint. That afternoon he spoke little, detailing notes for a presentation titled Patterns of Power and Silence, a case study in school dynamics. His Uncle Vincent stopped by after classes, sliding through the hallway in his tranquil way, a leather briefcase tucked beneath one arm. Tall, restrained, with an air of dignified authority, he stood among students who whispered assumptions without daring to test them. He greeted Noah with a light clasp on the shoulder. "Your father wanted me to remind you," he said softly, "that true justice teaches, it doesn't destroy." Noah nodded. His expression was solemn, but a subtle spark of purpose burned behind it. Before leaving, Vincent handed him a plain envelope. Inside was a small advanced recording device, gift and lesson both. Asterisk, to document what the world pretends not to see. Asterisk, and the world did pretend, until the news traveled. Marcy, the diner worker who had gambled her morals for comfort, finally phoned the school. She wanted to testify, she said, not because anyone told her to, but because she was tired of flinching each time that slap replayed in her memory. Coach Reeves suddenly remembered old injuries in his class that might warrant revisiting. Even Ethan's closest friends began inching away, afraid of being swept into the undertow of his downfall. By Sunday, the town's gossip had turned inward, neighbors wondering how easily they'd excuse tyranny dressed as teenage charisma. In the Bennett household, calm remained. Daniel read his newspaper over coffee, unhurried, while Noah drafted slides late into the night. When his mother looked in to whisper goodnight, she caught a glimpse of the page header, "From Victim to Advocate." He was building not an act of revenge, but a framework of redemption for an entire school. Outside, rain began again, the same rain that had followed the slap days earlier, cleansing, cold, and promising that the next week would wash everything in truth. That if you believe in giving bullies exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Monday dawned bright, but for Ethan Coleman it felt darker than any night. His reflection in the mirror showed the price of arrogance. Bloodshot eyes, trembling hands, a face suddenly older. Downstairs, his father drank coffee in silence, the newspaper unread beside him. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound between them until Mr. Coleman muttered, "We're meeting with Daniel Bennett this afternoon." Ethan's spoon paused midair. That name alone chilled him. He'd overheard enough from the adults of Westbrook to recognize that Daniel's influence didn't rely on uniformed men. His power came from the civility of someone who never needed to raise a threat aloud. At school, Noah arrived with calm precision. He stacked his books in the classroom, offered a polite good morning to a teacher who blushed with guilt, and quietly connected a USB drive to the computer in the auditorium. A rumor hushed through corridors that he would be presenting an investigative project before the entire staff and student body. Some dismissed it as myth, others sensed something monumental closing in. Noon came and curiosity filled every seat. When Noah stepped onto the stage in his pressed white shirt, there was an inexplicable gravity about him, not of fear but of certainty. "My name is Noah Bennett," he began, his young voice steady, carrying clearly to the last row. "And today we talk about what happens when silence protects cruelty." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. No intro music, no spectacle, just truth framed by courage. The first slide illuminated the screen. Documented acts of intimidation 2022 to 2024. Names, dates, evidence. The spectators leaned forward as Noah calmly guided them through a sequence that could only be described as devastating. Photographs of playground assaults. Screenshots of group chat humiliations. Audio clips from teachers ignoring pleas for help. The audience alternated between gasps and horrified silence. Then came the footage from the diner. The slap replayed once, its echo transfixing everyone. Ethan, seated in the third row, sank deeper and deeper into his chair until his body seemed to want to disappear. Noah paused the video exactly at the moment of impact, the red mark visible on his own young face frozen on the screen behind him. "That was the moment I realized something," he said quietly. "It wasn't just about me. It was about 23 other students who believed no one would ever stand for them." Slide after slide revealed patterns of neglect and complicity. For every bruise Ethan had dealt, Noah showed evidence of another child's story. Photos, text messages, silent witnesses who found their voice through him. The presentation grew from accusation into indictment, not of a single boy, but of an entire culture. Tears streaked faces across the auditorium. In one measured breath, Noah addressed those who had failed him. "Coach Reeves," he said, turning slightly toward the teachers section, "you saw some of these incidents. Pretending not to notice doesn't make them invisible." The man's face fell as the next clip projected behind him, showing exactly what Noah described. Then another slide, Marcy's recorded testimony from the diner, trembling but resolute. "I didn't stop it. I was afraid of his father. I'll never stay quiet again." Each word felt like a cleansing wine through the suffocating room. Finally, Noah returned to Ethan's name. "People say justice should teach, not destroy. I agree." The auditorium braced for the hammer yet got enlightenment instead. This presentation isn't about vengeance. It's about restoration, so that no student after me is treated as disposable. The lights flickered slightly as if the building itself exhaled. When the echoes of applause faded, Westbrook High felt changed, as if the sunlight filtering through the tall windows had found dust that had waited too long to be seen. Reporters emerged from the aisles, astonished teachers murmured thanks they had once been too afraid to give, and students pressed around Noah Bennett, too moved for words. Amid the gathering hum of praise and disbelief, Ethan Coleman sat motionless, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. His parents had slipped into the back of the auditorium mid-presentation. Now his mother wept quietly into a tissue while his father stood stiff and pale, stripped of his usual businesslike confidence. They both understood that what Noah had revealed couldn't be contained by small-town gossip. It was evidence, irrefutable, archived, ready to travel further than any of them could chase. Outside, clouds rolled low and heavy as if echoing the tension still hanging in the corridors. Ethan followed his father out to the parking lot, every step echoing louder than the last. Beside their sleek car stood Daniel Bennett, both civil and unsparing, reading something on his phone before folding it carefully into his pocket. "Mr. Coleman," he greeted, extending a hand with perfect composure. "I appreciate you coming." Ethan's father swallowed, trying and failing to match the man's calm tone. The conversation that followed was not loud, and none who watched could hear its words, but everyone saw what it did. Mr. Coleman's shoulders sank, his face drained, and he turned to his son with eyes that no longer promised protection. "We'll be leaving Westbrook before month's end," he said hoarsely. When Ethan whispered, "What did he say to you?" his father answered, "He reminded me that every family is sacred, and that ours has some learning to do." For Noah, that evening unfolded quietly. At home his mother set lasagna on the table, his father poured a modest glass of red wine, and the conversation felt lighter than it had in weeks. "You embarrassed powerful people today," Daniel said softly, pride flickering behind his measured tone, "but you also gave powerless people a voice." Noah smiled, weary but at peace. "I didn't want to ruin him, Dad. I wanted him to see what he'd done, to himself more than to me." His father nodded. "That's the difference between vengeance and justice, son. One ends the story, the other rewrites it." Later that night, thunder rolled across the sky while Noah finished transferring videos and testimony into a digital archive labeled * document to protect. * he sent copies to the district board, local press, and a national foundation combating bullying. Then he closed his laptop, exhaling for what felt like the first real breath in months. From his window, he saw headlights across the street where the Coleman's house stood dark except for a single room where Ethan sat alone. In his solitude, Ethan replayed Noah's words, * dignity can be taught through courage *, until they fused with memory of every cry he'd caused. Sleep did not take him that night, but something else did, understanding, slow and raw. When dawn arrived, he gathered every cruel message he'd sent and deleted them, one by one, watching the list diminish like confession. The next week, teachers implemented Noah's policy proposals. A new student council rose, half of its members survivors of bullying who no longer looked down when they passed a teacher. Hallway walls carried posters designed by classmates reading "Respect is the new cool" and * silence protects no one. Even Coach Reeves volunteered to run empathy workshops on weekends, too humbled to pretend indifference anymore. And as the town newspaper printed its front-page story, "Local student exposes culture of abuse, inspires reform," the closing line quoted Noah himself, * power is not how loudly you can shout, it's how quietly you can make things right. Across town, the Colemans packed boxes in tense silence. Realtors' signs appeared on their lawn before the weekend. Ethan had lost more than reputation. He had lost the illusion of untouchability. But in some fragile way he also gained perspective. Every time he closed another carton of trophies or medals, he remembered the 12-year-old boy's small, steady voice and wondered if perhaps that was what real strength looked like. For the first time Ethan wrote a letter, not an apology posted to social media, but a private one, folded and left on the Bennett's doorstep. Inside it, 2 sentences, * you made me see myself. I hope that means something someday. Then he left town with his family, carrying the weight of remnants and the seed of change both pressing on his heart. Spring arrived early in Westbrook that year, as if the thaw itself had hurried to keep pace with change. Students walked to school through rows of budding trees, the once hushed hallways now alive with conversations about projects, mentorships and the new Courage in Community program Noah Bennett had designed. What had begun as one boy's lonely stand had become an entire institution's rebirth. Teachers who had once turned away from conflict now listened first. Bullies who had laughed behind locked lockers now offered small, awkward kindnesses. And at the center of it all, Noah kept moving quietly, modest as if the transformation had simply happened on its own. The school board presented him with a plaque for civil courage, cameras flashing as reporters asked how it felt to have changed a town. Noah answered the same way he always did, directly, without ornament. It didn't start to change a town, he said. It started to protect a voice that was being silenced, mine, and it kept going because I realized there were more voices than I could count. Behind him, his parents watched. Daniel Bennett's expression held something rare, a mixture of pride and worry, knowing fame could do what even cruelty couldn't, tempt his son away from humility. After the ceremony, he clapped a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Remember," he murmured, "real power makes space for others to stand beside you." Noah smiled. "That's the only kind I want." Beyond Westbrook, the story reached further than any of them expected. National publications featured his project, universities wrote letters of invitation, and a foundation requested permission to replicate his document to protect model in 200 schools. Yet amid the applause, Noah's memory often wandered back to a gray afternoon at Silver Jack's diner, the sting on his cheek, the coins spinning across the tiles, and the silence afterward that had felt like the whole world holding its breath. That moment, once filled with humiliation, now reminded him how truth can grow from pain if tended with patience. As for Ethan Coleman, news of him drifted in fragments. Some said his family settled near a coastal town where he worked part-time at a youth center, teaching younger kids to play football without cruelty. Whether rumor or redemption, Noah chose to believe the gentler version. Sometimes the greatest victories are invisible, the quiet transformation of a spirit once lost. In the evenings, when he read about another school adopting his plan, he would glance toward the small wooden box on his desk that held the cracked lenses from his first broken pair of glasses. He kept them as a reminder: when people try to break your vision, you build a clearer one. Years later, when he addressed graduates as their student body president, Noah stood on the same auditorium stage where the truth had first changed everything. The seats were filled again, this time with laughter instead of fear. "We can't measure strength in fists or in power," he told them. "We measure it in how we lift each other after we fall. When you defend someone's dignity, you defend your own." The crowd rose for him, yet his glance found his father at the back, nodding once with a faint smile. Outside, the afternoon sunlight gleamed off the school's new mural, a painting of open hands releasing a single lighted coin into the air. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Asterisk dedicated to all who chose empathy over silence." Asterisk. Noah touched the engraving gently before walking home, hearing in the distance the city he'd changed with patience, documentation, and grace. The lesson had carried full circle. In a world quick to shout, the quiet boy had proven that calm conviction could echo the loudest. And out beyond the school gates, spring kept unfolding, steady and unstoppable, like justice finally at peace with itself. If this story moved you, share it, talk about it, or pass it on. Every time someone chooses empathy, another voice gets heard.